Dear students, today we are going to discuss the topic hypothesis. We have discussed or we have gone through this term in the business research process and the steps of the business research process. But we have to discuss this term in deep because this is that much important to a business research or any kind of research. That's why we are discussing this topic in detail. So as we know, hypotheses are more specific than propositions. Hypothesis formulates a specific statement that is empirically testable. You have to be very clearly understand the terminology empirically testable. A proposition is a statement about observable phenomena that may be judged as true or false, we can say. See, what is proposition is all about? As we know, every researcher will have some observation in his hand. As a good researcher, he is an observer also. So observations will become propositions, and the propositions will become hypotheses, and the hypothesis must be empirically testable. That means hypothesis has to be tested with facts and figures, and it must be statistically proven as true or false. Then only we can use it as a part of a research. See, we have an example here. It's regarding the alcoholic usage in a country or a state and the death rate in a country. So this is something which is applicable to our society. So the hypotheses are like this. The alternative hypothesis one is that drunkards die young, and the hypothesis two states that drunkards die old, and the null hypothesis states that there is no relationship between drinking liquor and the age of death. So these are just the propositions or the observations of the researcher. So he is trying to prove whether there is any difference or whether there is any relationship between the liquor usage and the age of death. So we are taking into consideration these both variables and trying to make a study on that. So whether alcoholism affecting the age of death, that is what we are trying to understand. So this is what an hypothesis is all about. I think it's clear to you. So the important one is the different types of hypothesis. So now on we are going to discuss the different types of hypothesis. One is descriptive hypothesis, we can say. As the name suggests, it tends to describe some characteristics of an object, a situation, an individual, or even an organization or institution. So this is trying to explain or to describe what is happening in a scenario or to a population or to a sample. That is what this kind of hypothesis is trying to do. For example, students from IIM are placed faster than other B schools. This is something which we know. IIM students are getting placements faster than other students. So this is a scenario with regard to an organization or to our education system. So this is trying to explain that. And the other one, there is less industry institutional interaction. This is something which related to the education system that is prevailing in our country. That means our institutions are not providing what the industry needs. So this is trying to explain the scenario or to describe the scenario. So descriptive hypotheses are used for the explanation or for the descriptive analysis of a particular situation. And the second one, it is relative hypothesis. As the name suggests, it intends to describe the relationship between two variables. For example, more cohesive the group, better is the output. So we are taking into consideration two variables, the cohesiveness of the group and the output or the performance. So here we are trying to find out whether there is any relationship between these two variables. So if there is any relation exists, the management can make the group more cohesive and they can thereby improve the performance. This kind of hypothesis is used for such kind of purposes. And the next one is a working hypothesis. As you know, working hypothesis, or otherwise we can call it as work in progress hypothesis. That means it is framed in the early stages of research, we can say. This may be altered or modified as the investigation proceeds, because we may have an understanding or kind of a judgment in the early stage or the beginning stage of the research. Then later we can change if the things are changing, or if we find more knowledge in that kind of particular area. For example, demand and quality are related, but later it may be replaced as investigation proceeds. In the beginning stage, we states this kind of a statement, but later maybe some other variables can be added to our study. Then we can expand our hypothesis. That is what the working hypothesis is all about. And another important one, it is null hypothesis. That means it states that there is no difference between the parameter and the statistics that is being compared. We have to consider or to underline the word no difference. So here actually the parameter is actually related to the population, and the statistics is actually related to the sample. So here we are trying to find out whether the statistics represent the population and whether there is any difference between the population and the sample. That is what we are comparing. So as a example here, there is no relationship between academic excellence and success in business field. So what will be the alternative hypothesis? There is relationship between academic excellence and success in business field. So we have to prove whether null hypothesis is standing or whether the alternative hypothesis is standing. For that, we need to conduct statistical analysis and to prove whether this happens or not. Another one is analytical hypothesis. These are used when one would like to specify the relationship between changes in one property leading to change in the another property. This is something which we discussed in different in independent and dependent variable case. So example as income level related to number of children in the family. So here we are comparing or analyzing whether the number of children in the family affects the income level of a family. So this one in a variable is as increases, whether that affects the other variable. That is what we are analyzing here. Another one, it is statistical hypothesis. These are developed from samples that are measurable. Measurable samples are being developed here. So we have to quantify and to analyze and to prove our statement or hypothesis. There are two types generally. One, it is hypothesis which indicates the difference. For example, there is a difference between the performance of executives in public sector and the private sector. See, this is something which we can observable. So we can take the performance of the managers or the executives with certain parameters, and we can compare and prove whether there is any difference in the performance. Second one, hypothesis which indicates the association or the relationship. There is perfect relationship between price and demand. This is something which is a part of the economic theory. So it is something which is proved also. So whether we can check to a particular product, this kind of a theory is applicable or not. So this kind of associations or relationships are being formed part of statistical hypothesis. The last one, it is common sense hypothesis. These are based on what is being observed. So as we know that a researcher will have observations. A very good researcher will have very good observations. So these are all general observations or common sense observations, we can say. So on the basis of such observations, we are forming hypotheses. For example, urban laborers are paid better than rural laborers. This is something which is common. We know that. That is why the rural people are moving towards urban areas. This is something common. But we have to check whether this is applicable to all kind of jobs or in all cities, in all scenarios. We have to check that. But this is something common to all. We don't need much analytical skills for this kind of hypothesis. So these are all the different types of hypothesis, we can say. I hope you have understood the terminology hypothesis in detail and the different types of hypothesis. Hope this session was helpful to all of you and beneficial to all of you. And thanks for listening. Thank you so much.